Welcome, everybody, to this April meeting of the Concord Municipal Light Board. We have a full agenda, so we'll get underway. We have one set of minutes to um, review and approve. John, do you want to explain what's up?
Sure. Yeah. Over the weekend, I distributed the minutes from our March 12th meeting. One thing, Jason, the minutes that I distributed were a little different than those that were in the meeting packet. And I'd made one modest change where I indicated that I was not participating in the vote regarding the power purchase agreement that
Yep.
the board was evaluating. So if we can make sure that those are the minutes that are posted, that would be great. But if no one has any comments on the March 12th minutes, I move that they be approved by the board.
There a second?
I'll second, Chris.
And Brian,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
and Bianca.
Yes.
And Chris?
Yes.
And I'm a yes as well. Great. Thank you very much, folks. And I have several things I wanted to mention in my chair's report. First, we had talked for a while about doing a public meeting around the topic of the power supply and to provide some background education for the public on that topic. I want to recommend that we not do that this year for a couple of key reasons. A smaller reason and a bigger reason. The smaller reason is having made the decision recently to extend the Seabrook contract, we're not going to be in the short run making very dramatic decisions about the power supply, and it's not clear that there's a need for significant public input on that. But the more important reason is our big public education push this year needs to be around time of use rate. That's what we need to be explaining to the public, getting them focused on, not around which contracts for which power sources we have. And after we get time of use out of the way, it maybe would be appropriate to do a public meeting. I hope no one has objection to that, but that's my view on that topic. Second, we have a second board meeting coming up this month, later in April. We're going to be hearing from someone from the Sacramento Municipal Utility District, which has extensive experience implementing time of use rates. That person's going to talk about that utility's experience with time of use. I think it will be very useful for everyone. And then the third thing, normally I wouldn't comment on what is happening at the federal level with energy policy, but I just want to let folks know that things are going to get pretty tricky in ways that potentially implement what we're doing here in Concord. Yesterday, President Trump issued an executive order that, like many of the executive orders, it's not particularly clearly written, but it seems to indicate that they are asserting authority to revoke and change any climate change and energy policy from any state and assert authority over the states in the realm of energy policy making. That's going to be controversial, and it could make a difference in terms of what ultimately happens with Massachusetts state policy, and which ultimately impacts what we do here. So, any comments on the idea of not having a public meeting in the next few months, Brian?
I agree with the public meeting not being relevant from when it was first proposed, and the fact that we want the community focused on TOU rates and understanding those. That will be more than the community can digest, so we shouldn't overwhelm them. And the Trump executive order, it's it's going to be what it's going to be, but like DEI, the town did not designate itself a sanctuary city. We didn't remove our DEI programs. It's maybe relabeling.
Yeah, well, it won't affect our policies immediately, but it is something that could lead to a more challenging terrain for implementing what we want to do here.
Yes, definitely.
And okay. And John.
Yeah, I'm going to just quibble a little bit with Brian's characterization, and I can't imagine we disagree. I think it continues to be a relevant issue, just because I think that it will influence kind of some of the decisions that we make. But I agree that time of use is the most important issue that we have in front of us, and that we really should be focusing on that for our communications with the public.
Okay, thank you. Let's turn to the director's report, Jason.
Thank you. I have a few updates here, and I'm going to try something a little bit different today. I typically cover a lot of different topics, and sometimes it might be challenging for board members to keep track of them. So I'm going to just share kind of a bulleted list as I go through, so that folks can follow along. And then also at the end, if there are questions, it might make it easier to remember, what I brought up. First, we did have some high winds last night. It seems like they've calmed down a little bit. I didn't get any calls, and I didn't see any large outages. So I hope we went through that relatively unscathed. I wanted to mention, we did hear yesterday that there was an arc flash event in Belmont for two of the Belmont line workers. Belmont is an MLP like Concord. And I think that it's just important to underscore how dangerous this job is. They were in an underground vault. They are hopefully okay. They were transported to the hospital and left the vault under their own power. They had PPE on. But underground vaults, as you know, Concord is about 50% undergrounded. They can be very dangerous conditions. They are often filled with water, have to be pumped out before you can even enter them. And so I just, our thoughts are with those folks, and hope that they're okay. And just a reminder that we have several staff who work in these environments every day, and we're just very grateful that they do so, and hope that they continue to be as safe as possible. Kind of touching on what Warren mentioned about the what's going on the national level, we are hearing, that many of the Inflation Reduction Act dollars are frozen and only being released after kind of a more extensive review. Several projects were paused, and then there were active court cases, and then the money was eventually released from the EPA and DOE in a couple examples. But it does seem like it's getting more difficult to release some of these funds. They're still there. They were appropriated by Congress, but as everybody's aware, there's been a lot of changes on the federal level. So we're watching that carefully. We do have, we stay in contact with lobbyists and various people who are getting us information on this. And, all the other MLPs are still moving forward with projects. They're just, remaining cautiously optimistic that they won't have any issues. I wanted to mention the 250th. This is taking a lot of time, a lot of staff time. We've got just 10 days from today for the big event here in Concord. We're all super excited for the celebration that's planned. We don't know how many people are coming, but it will be in the tens or hundreds of thousands. CMLP has been planning our response and what we are going to be doing. We're going to have 17 personnel working that day. Many of them will be here at the light plant. Others may be at a substation. I will be at the Emergency Operations Center. And we've gone through kind of different response scenarios. We're going to have UTVs or golf carts stationed in a couple different places so that if we need to get access to look at something, we can get there quickly through crowds. And we're working kind of with all the various partners to make sure that we are positioned in a well to respond to anything that happens in the area where there'll be a lot of people gathered. I wanted to mention the Canadian energy tariffs. I did update the web page that we have on this just to explain to folks. The tariffs did take effect, 10% tariffs on March 4th, but a couple days later, the energy stopped flowing, and Hydro-Quebec said that it was more of an economic decision. It didn't have anything to do with the tariffs. It's just prices were not worth it for them to send the electricity down. So right now, we don't anticipate any impact having been felt yet, but that obviously remains to be seen based on what happens in the future. I want to mention that we did have the green home tours happen a couple weeks ago. I know Jan and Pamela are here, and they pull off amazing events for energy management, and this one was the same. There were a lot of folks who visited. They are there to see actual homes that have been retrofitted with the latest technology and heat pumps and insulation, weatherproofing, things like that. And just get an idea, talk to homeowners and find out how these things work. They also can ask questions and get questions answered about the incentive programs that we have. And then we do collect people's information so we can follow up with them to see if they have any questions. So I thank all the staff who spent so much time and effort putting together that event. The Energy Management Group also updated their 2024 heat pump tally. They do this every year to kind of take a more detailed look at what we've accomplished in the last year. And in 2024, we added 164 new heat pumps, which represents almost 20% of the total installed since we began tracking in 2012. And if you have taken a look at the skim up the updates in the packet, you can see a nice graph that was put together there. I want to give an update on the middle school solar and battery situation. So I had a really positive meeting with the assistant superintendent last week, and I think we've come to kind of an agreement on the site license. So we're waiting to see when that can be finalized and approved by the school committee. It doesn't have to be approved by the school committee. The superintendent can sign this, but because we've gone there in the past and discussed this, she would like, I think, to have it on the agenda and just have the school board discuss it, school committee discuss it. We did meet with PLM on Monday to go over the report on the landfill. And that was basically commissioned by us to figure out, could the infrastructure take the full discharging of a battery to deal with or to mitigate the peak, and could it accept the additional megawatts of solar that we would like to add there? And if so, what other controls can we put in place to make sure that this doesn't cause any problems on the distribution system? So they are going to do some brainstorming on that. One of the challenges that we face obviously is having not yet got our SCADA deployed and not yet having the metering domain set up, we still don't have a lot of visibility into the actual demand and real-time production of solar. And then we also don't have a way to push excess power back past the substation. So we're looking at sort of some interim controls that we might be able to use, but also just trying to figure out what can we take to the various third parties that we're working with to figure out how we can get a project together. We've also met with Convergent, solar and battery storage provider last week. We're meeting with MWEC again today, and we have other site visits planned to continue to look at our options. We are looking at everything from tolling agreements where we don't own the battery, but so somebody else owns it, maintains it, but we use it whenever we want, to shared savings models where we sort of have an agreement where we come up with a priority for addressing the solar saturation, and then anything else can the vendor can use to shave peaks or do arbitrage, and then a model where we just flat out own the battery and perhaps we just hire a third party to maintain it and monitor it and dispatch for the peaks. Let's see, find my little clicker here. We have some new hires and recruitment updates. I'm really happy to announce that on Monday, we're going to have a third-class line worker starting. His name is Eric, and this has been a long time coming. We also are getting ready to make a job offer to a grade 2 line worker, which is higher than grade 3. And so we're really excited about that candidate as well. It was kind of a last-minute find, and we think that these people really exemplify the values here at CMLP and are going to be great proponents of public power and hopefully very helpful and safe additions to the team. This would probably kind of suspend our hiring for the line worker position. We would love to have hired first class or grade 1 line workers, but we're just not finding them out there. So there will be some more development for third and second class line workers, but we think that they're coming in very prepared relative to what they could be for an apprentice. And hopefully in a few years, they can start to move their way up the ladder. It can take up to 10 years to become a first-class line worker from the time that you're hired as an apprentice. I'm also really excited to announce that on April 28th, later this month, we're going to have our new financial manager starting after a 7-month search. Her name is Nan Okarma, and you'll likely see her at our next board meeting, which I think will be her second day of work, work, or it may be the meeting in May, depending on if she has to do HR onboarding things. But anyway, you'll see her soon, and we're very excited for her to be starting. We also have interviews continuing for our customer service specialist position and our network engineer position. I wanted to give a few updates on time of use. We don't really have an agenda topic today for this, so I wanted to just highlight a couple things that have happened. I'm happy to announce that we have selected a cost of service study consultant who's a Utility Financial Solutions, or UFS. Carrie has signed the agreements as of yesterday, and we have an onboarding meeting, I believe, tomorrow. And this is just really exciting. Laura moves at breakneck speed. I'm really grateful that she's been able to actually make these things happen so quickly. And we're going to be hopefully still sticking with the timeline that we outlined at our last meeting. I did want to just mention that in terms of process, we received 2 proposals. The other one was from Baker Tilly, and met as a group, 4 of us, Joe Repoff and Carol Hilton, Laura and myself, multiple times. And we did check the references for UFS extensively, spoke to 4 different organizations that have worked with them on rate making or cost of service studies. And we're really excited to partner with somebody new this time, and maybe we'll bring some different ideas up than we had last time with Baker Tilly. We're also working on the calculators that will be accessible for the public to kind of look at what the time of use rates will do to their bills. They can actually see kind of a current bill and a time of use bill based on some input, and then maybe another calculator that has different appliances or things that they have, electric car, pool, thermostat, electric heat pumps, whatever. If they select these things, they can kind of see what shifting the usage a little bit to off-peak would do to their bills. So excited about that. Carol is working on getting the requirements NISC for the bill print changes and collaborating with them. As Warren mentioned, we do have a second meeting this month with SMUD. And then Laura and I are taking a 2-day APPA rate making seminar that starts today and concludes tomorrow. And it does focus specifically on time of use rates. So we're excited to see if we learn anything on that. Just 2 more updates. We are working on onboarding with the Connected Homes program from MWEC. This is a sort of a load management program that customers can use to enroll certain devices like their thermostats, their electric vehicles, their car chargers, and more, the batteries, to have them managed ever so slightly for the peaks and receive a bill credit prior to time of use. Once time of use is there and enforced, then these will just be tools to help people lower their bills without them having to really do anything. It's a very low impact program for users. It's very relatively low cost for CMLP, and we've been working with them extensively to get onboarded. You probably won't see too much for the next couple of months because we have a lot of work behind the scenes, but a little bit later this year, you'll start seeing more and more messaging about this program. And then the last thing I wanted to mention was that we are working with Public Works. They are creating a stormwater utility and that will need to be billed. And right now, the water sewer bills go out with our vendor NISC, and our customer service handle those calls. So we are going to be partnering with them to kind of roll out this new service, as well as their curbside billing, which is for the waste pickup that formerly was managed in a different way. It's going to be in NISC now. So the customer service team have spent significant time and will spend more time working with them on that. So that concludes my update. I'll leave this up on the screen for a minute in case people have any questions.
Yeah, a lot going on. It's amazing how many different things are in the air, and it looks like you're making great progress, and it's especially good that you have some new hires. I just have one quick question, and then I'll turn to Brian. You talked about the various options for the battery. When do you think you're going to have a recommendation to make to the board as to how to proceed with battery storage?
That's a great question. I think that in the next couple of months, we're going to be able to outline our options, and that maybe it's something we can talk about as a topic to put on the agenda to go into more detail. We've been giving kind of, high level overviews of this, but it might be nice to dive in and look at the different models, look at the different options before us. We certainly have collected quite a lot of information and have had dozens and dozens of meetings with lots of people. So I think that maybe in the May or even June meeting, we could have an agenda topic and get really into that and sort of talk about where we are. I hope that we have the solar RFP issued very soon, as soon as they can agree to the site license. And that will definitely help us identify the battery scope. Does it need to be on site? Is there no battery required at the school? Is it going to be off site? What is are we doing the canopies? So there's a lot of things that go into that. We're going to talk a little bit later about solar and some of the businesses that are looking at adding large amounts of solar. So it's definitely important, and we're moving forward with it. But I think in the next month or two, we could dive in and see where we're at. And then, I hope soon, in the next quarter or two, that we're ready to sort of announce the project or get the board feedback on it.
Okay, thank you, Brian, and then John.
Yeah. Are you monitoring low load situations? This is the time of year that we're worried about that loss of MCI and low load issues. So I just want to hear
Yeah.
you're doing that.
Yes, we are. And you know what? We have just 17 meters left to deploy. So with 99.8% or 9% of the town deployed on the AMI system, we do have that 15-minute interval data that's stored forever. So we're not going to lose that. And we are looking at the substations. Today is going to be a bright day and pretty cool, but we'll keep an eye on that. It might be something that we're looking at or the week after. But yes, we are watching that.
I'll just mention, Brian, that the lowest we've seen so far this year is about 8.5 megawatts.
Oh, that's good.
2 megawatts higher than the lowest load 2 years ago. But I don't think we've hit our worst week yet. So
Right.
but that's what it is, where it stands so far.
Yeah, if it's gonna happen, it's most likely gonna be when everybody's in church on Sunday, and it's nice and cool and clear skies and yeah.
Can you elaborate a little bit more? What's the issue there specifically? Not sure I understand it.
So what happens is our substation on Sundays in the spring is the lowest customer demand for electricity, and we are putting that through our substation, and it's the solar that's being produced in town is peaking in its production. So low demand, peak in town generation creates very low demand at the substation, and the substation is not currently designed to flow backwards. And so there's concerns about this low load and our current technology.
Got it. Thank you.
I wanted to say that I've heard about the Connected Homes program from Hingham, and it's interesting. There's some good, there's some bad, but it's great to see that we're getting that kind of program here. Finally, I got to express my frustration with the schools and the site license. This should have been done 5 months ago. I mean, this is dragging this project out. So if it gets signed and done, I'll be very happy, but I do not want to hear next month that it's still in the wings waiting. It's hurting us.
Sorry, on that point, can I just ask a clarifying question?
Yes, Cameron.
Jason, I think in the past you had mentioned maybe that is it multiple licenses there? Was it one for part like the roof and another one? Are we talking both licenses, all licenses?
We're only talking about the site license for the solar on the roof and the solar on the canopies.
So we have to go through this with the batteries as well?
Yep. And this was, council is the one who did that, not the schools. They did not ask it to be separate. It was because of the procurement methods that are being used that are different. So it just had to be on a different agreement.
Yeah, but the frustration I have is how long we have to keep delaying putting this RFP out and getting actual work done. That's sorry, I just had to vent for a moment because this
Okay,
is
thank you. And Chris, let me let you know that Cameron is here as the select board's representative and liaison to the light board. And John.
Yeah, no, I just want to express my support. I don't know the specifics of it, but of the MWEC Connected Homes program, right? These are the kind of tools that customers are going to need to, if they're able to effectively respond to the time of use signals. So I think this is, a great development, and really look forward to hearing more about how it can be implemented and how we can support it to make sure that it's able to kind of achieve the full benefits that it offers.
Thank you.
Is
Cameron,
it okay if I ask just a couple of clarifying questions?
quickly.
Yeah. So, Jason, on the IRA, do we have specifically funded projects that we're sort of waiting for funding on there?
We don't have any pending submissions, but we do have project inception. And so in other words, because of the work we did on the school for the solar and battery preparation, we've qualified for a project start in the year 2024 and sort of locked in our place to be eligible for that funding. We are not waiting for a reimbursement at this point.
Got it. And the last question, you added 164 heat pumps. Are those 164 houses or because some houses have multiple pumps, right?
Great question. Jan or Laura might be able to answer that question.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Those are 164 households.
Oh, great. Thank you. Awesome.
welcome.
Thanks.
Good questions, Cameron. Okay, let's turn to the
Oh, Bianca had a
broadband.
question.
Yeah, Warren, I just,
Oh, sorry, it wasn't showing up on my screen.
sorry, I have to have my screen off today. I look like a
Yeah.
fire had laser
No,
treatment, so.
no. Sorry.
So just on the connected homes, that sounds very exciting. Wanted to ask separately, or maybe in conjunction with that, for the, managing the peak supply from solar, is there a way for CMLP to turn off the solar production on rooftops?
Today, no. No, we have no access to those resources. With connected homes, no, I don't think so. I think it's battery, but there's a lot of logistical and legal problems with that.
Okay.
But yeah, so no, not today. I don't think connected homes has anything that shuts off solar.
Okay, I just have one thought to add to that then. In that case, if I'm not mistaken, some of our problems come during spring break when everybody's out, nobody's home and it's springtime and sunny and cool. And we get a lot of solar supply without demand. Just a thought, perhaps we could encourage folks that are going to leave for spring break to shut off the solar when they leave the home. Just as a precaution for our system, if it comes to that. Just a thought that I wanted to put out there.
Yeah, okay. I can talk to Laura. We can look at the data to see if it's correlated with spring break week. I think it's more just the extremely mild temperatures and then the higher altitude of the sun and the more solar radiation. And I think that also, cooler days make solar panels more efficient because
Right.
the heat up, they produce a little bit less. So I think that it's a confluence of those things more than that particular week. But Laura and I can look at the data.
Okay, yeah.
Thank you. Pamela, just let you know, we're gonna save public comments to later. We need to move now to the broadband report.
All right, I'll go very quickly. Dale will be there at the next meeting in May to give the update. He could not be here today. The broadband team has been working a lot on supporting the Eaton meters and the rollout of the AMI and the networked gateways that are providing the backbone for that. They've also been working a lot on the 250th, as I mentioned. All of those planning events extend to almost every department in town. They're getting internet connectivity to the Jumbotron that's going to be on Stowe Street in the parking lot between the library and the Umbrella Art Center. And they're also working on getting internet connectivity to the media trailer that's going to be kind of behind the D funeral home. And, just supporting all the events surrounding that day. And they'll also be on site to address any issues on the day of the celebration. I don't know if anybody knows this, but the police dispatch center was flooded many months ago. And as a result, they're having to relocate dispatch. So the broadband team has been instrumental in getting all the connectivity for the new dispatch center, which includes radio and fiber and Ethernet. So it's been a lot of work over there. Dale has been working on the residential retrofit program, which is this grant that provides the last mile funding for lower income access for broadband. And we're hoping to see if the sites in Concord end up on the final round of the RFP that's being issued from the Mass Broadband Institute. And then we're also just about to finalize some dark fiber lease renewals with the school district. This is one of our larger dark fiber leases and is in the ballpark of about $30,000 a year because they have a lot of fiber, about 50 miles of 6 strands of fiber. So probably one of our biggest dark fiber customers, if not the biggest. And that's all I've got for the broadband update.
Any questions for Jason about broadband?
No, just great job, and hope the 250th goes well. It's going to be a challenge. Oh, and this may not be related, but I did see the cell phone truck that's in the parking lot near downtown, and the reception's great. Let's get a real tower somewhere.
Yeah. Okay, so we're going to get to meet some of the light plant staff. Is that still true, Jason?
Yes, it is. I'll turn it over
And
to
are we
Laura.
going to find out who we're going to meet?
Yes, I'll turn it over to Laura now. She'll give an update.
If you would let me share my screen, Jason.
Yep. It's all
Yes.
set.
Okay. Sorry, I don't see sharing.
Big green button at the bottom next to
Aha, I was looking in the top right. Okay, so sorry, you're looking at a PowerPoint, but can everyone see the PowerPoint here?
Yep.
I'm just going to give a quick introduction to this fabulous department called Energy Management. Our mission is to help our customers manage their energy costs and reduce their carbon emissions through electrification, improved efficiency, and the generation of carbon-free solar power at their homes and businesses. We've got 4 members of our team, 2 of which you're going to hear from today. Our team lead is Janicetti, and she's helped by Pamela Cady. We have 2 part-time employees, Kim Slack and Ethan Heberman, who both work as heat pump coaches for the department. We offer over 10 rebates to residential homeowners, everything from electric lawnmowers to heat pump water heaters, the number of electric vehicle programs, including rebates to help offset the purchase price of the car, rebates to help offset the cost of installing level 2, rebates to encourage off-peak charging, and also for our commercial customers, an EV charging station rebate program. We also offer home energy assessments through our partner Energy New England, and we have long offered and continue to offer rebates for the installation of solar at homeowners and businesses. We have 2 coaching services. One are the heat pump coaches that I just mentioned, and they really help customers become better informed so they can confidently make decisions about whether to purchase a heat pump. They also can help the customer get a correctly sized, well-designed system, and they also help the customers access the substantial rebates and other incentives, both for heat pumps and for weatherization improvements. That's the heat pump coaches. And then on the EV side, we have trained EV specialists through our partner Energy New England. They can help customers in a one-on-one setting with everything from choosing the right EV to programming a vehicle to charge off peak. Customers really love these one-on-one resources that tailor to their specific questions. On the commercial side, we offer LED lighting, heat pumps, electric vehicle charging stations, and solar panels to businesses. And among the many things that Jan and Pamela and Kim and Ethan do, I've mentioned rebates mostly, but they also have other jobs, including preparing reports for various regulatory and community bodies. That's just a brief introduction. I'm going to turn it over now to Jan to introduce herself, and take it away, Jan. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jan Assetti. I am CMLP's Energy Efficiency and Electrification Coordinator. I've been working at CMLP for 16 years. And right now, one focus of mine is improving our capacity to let the community know what our progress is in electrifying and fostering energy efficiency. We have been working with the GIS team here to start that process by providing more information about how the adoption of heat pumps is going. And I wanted to give you a preview of a story map that we've been working on with the GIS team that they've been creating with our help. So hopefully you can
Yep.
see this here.
Yep, we can.
And this is a combination of a map which shows how heat pump adoption has grown over time by showing the total number of households with heat pumps, both with increased density on the map and also a total cumulative number at the bottom from starting with 2012. And we also have a graph, a bar graph. We will soon be updating this graph with the updated tally that Pamela Cady compiled for us for 2024. And then those additional heat pumps will show up on the map as well. And we also took the opportunity to include in this story map some answers to commonly asked questions that people have about heat pumps. For example, how have heat pumps worked out for others in Concord? We've featured some of those folks in our newsletters over the years, and those articles are available in the story map. And then the Climate Action Committee had also compiled some case studies as well of people with heat pumps. So that's one of a number of questions that we've addressed as part of this story map. So that is one example of what the Energy Management Division is working on right now.
Should I go?
Yeah, please.
My name's Pamela Cady, and I work with Jan and Laura. I'm the Energy Efficiency and Electrification Specialist for CMLP, and I help with the team as our mission of financial and technical assistance to the community so that they can understand their electric use, decrease energy consumption, and transition to renewably sourced power. And we are excited that our programs have helped Concord be an energy leader in Massachusetts. It's a great feeling. So some of the specifics of some of the things I do are I interact with residents and businesses daily as they engage with our programs. I pre-approve technical documents for all solar and battery projects in town. I'm always, every day, continuously on the lookout for how I can help improve both our internal processes so we can streamline our programs and our public resources so that our customers can be better informed. And I organize and analyze our program participation data, which is useful in budget forecasting, required reporting to agencies, calculating greenhouse gas reductions resulting from our work, and mapping the future for our programs. So that's what I work on, among other things.
Very
Great.
good.
Oh, and I forgot to say I've worked here about a decade.
Right.
Well, both
Well,
these
you-
individuals are longtime employees who give a lot to the light plant. They're very committed every day and come to work, hoping to make this a better place.
Well, haven't just made the light plant a better place, but they've made the whole community a better place. And they've had a lot of visibility in the town and have helped a lot of folks. I had a question, but Brian, you had something you wanted to say.
I have known Jan and Pamela for a very long time, and they both do excellent work. This community is one of the most progressive electrification communities in the state, and they're the people that make it happen, as well as the heat pump coaches. That one-on-one connection is super important to customers and makes a huge difference in the adoption rate. I love the map, the GIS map. I know that we have solar maps that have been done over the years. It would be great to see that similar effort for solar, but also EVs. I don't know how you do EVs, but it would be great to see a map of those three technologies and how they have kind of grown and conquered over the last decade through your work. And finally, I do know of a woman who has geothermal for her house, and those are kind of rare cases where she it's a rare case to find someone who's added geothermal to an existing house and dug the well. So I want to make sure that if her story could be highlighted, that'd be great. I'll
Thank
send you the info later or by email.
Thank you, Brian. John.
Yeah, no, I similarly just want to give a little testimonial. I installed heat pumps in last year, and I consider myself a pretty sophisticated energy consumer. But frankly, I got 2 quotes, and was challenged to kind of sort through the 2 quotes, and having a heat pump coach provide me with advice really gave me the confidence to make a decision. And right, without clear understanding in terms of which is the best alternative, customers will sometimes just decide to kind of walk away and say, this is too much for me. So, the heat pump coach and the whole team, the service they provide, I thought really was exceptional. So, thank you.
Thank you.
I will similarly echo thanks to Jan and Pam and Laura and Jason and the entire CMLP staff. You guys are tremendous. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. And I had one question, which is, how do you think what you do is going to change with time of use rates? Are there going to be new challenges to getting folks to adopt efficiency and electrification methods? Or do you think it's going to be easier because you could tie it into time of use rates and adapting to them?
I can take that if you want, Jan, or you can
Yeah.
take it.
Please go ahead, Laura.
So I think the time of use is going to be tremendously helpful for electric vehicles. It fits hand in glove with that technology and just the convenience of charging for most people overnight, when the cost of service is going to be cheaper. I think it is going to be a little more challenging for heat pumps, which tend to run continuously, and people are not generally encouraged to cycle those. So there may be some headwinds there. I think more importantly on the heat pump side is actually going to be what comes out of this cost of service study with respect to seasonality and whether we begin to have seasonal rates, because the most expensive time to serve electricity in New England is in the winter, and that's when the heat pumps run. So heat pumps are, we have some headwinds ahead of us, and look forward to the board's guidance on how we might manage those.
Thank you.
I could just add, I think we have a very small number of batteries that have gone in on, residential scale batteries that have gone in town. And I think that those would be a great aid for dovetailing with time of use, both with solar, if the home already has solar, and even if they don't have solar, just in terms of charging it up when the rates are low at night, and then working off of that during the day when rates are higher. We don't have a program specifically promoting that right now, but that is a technology that could be really helpful. And that's why, for instance, an electric vehicle is a perfect use case for time of use rates, because it already has a battery in it.
And
That's a very good point. It might be good to run some numbers on batteries and what their potentially payback period is once we have time of use rates in place, so people can really see whether it makes sense for them to install batteries, whether or not we have any special incentives for them.
Yeah, we don't have any incentives right now at all for that. We do have incentive for solar, but not for batteries. And I do already on one of our pages have just a little sentence about average costs for install per battery in the last few years.
But we should actually, this is a different topic, we should probably look into whether we should have incentives for batteries, because it is a technology that enables effective adaptation to time of use rates.
yeah.
So, Brian.
Sorry, one quick question on that. So I know that there are currently some homeowners that have these batteries installed. I think it would be good to start tracking them like you did for heat pumps and the suggestion for solar and so forth. So that could be another technology listed on that map to show that to potential customers that people are already doing it. That is, that's a big deal to people who are looking at what is a very expensive capital cost. They want to know that they're not going to be the first lemming over the cliff. They want to know that others went forward and survived, and gives them confidence to go forward.
I'm not sure, Jan, if we have so few batteries in town that we would be concerned about privacy issues in terms of showing on the map, or we could make the dots big enough that maybe it wouldn't be a problem.
Well, hey, thanks very much. You folks do great work, and it's good to see you at the board meeting, and I'm sure we're going to see you again. Well, let's switch to the next topic, which I will turn over to Jason, which is our solar policies.
Great, thank you. I'll try to make up a little bit of time on this topic so that we have plenty of time for our last agenda topic. So I wanted to just brief the board on this. It's come up over the last few months and probably since it was conceived, but we have currently not a interconnection policy, but a net metering policy that says that any installation of solar over 50 kilowatts requires a battery. And this was put on there, that this requirement was adopted operationally to address some of the solar saturation issues that we have, where we have very low demand at sometimes with all the solar that's in town. We do have the two large solar installations, one at the former WR Gray site in West Concord and then the other at the landfill. And, over time, we've seen the behind the meter solar just increase and increase. And I think that this was maybe 2022 that this policy was kind of put in place to require batteries. There have been a couple larger institutions that have asked for kind of these big solar arrays, and then we're told of the battery requirement and they kind of backed off. So we do know that it has discouraged some solar adoption. That wasn't the intent. Obviously, the intent was to hopefully mitigate some of the impacts of the solar. One of the findings of the solar task force that met for the better part of a year to review how we could help get more solar in Concord was to explore alternatives to the battery requirement. And the chief one among those is curtailment. So basically saying that they can install a large array, but they can't push back past the meter, right? So, and there might be variations upon that. You can't push back a certain amount. You can't push back more than this. You can't push back anything. So right now, just to step back, the issues that we have are hopefully going to be addressed with some new technologies that are coming in the next few years. From a macro level, solar can be intermittent. We can get cloudy days, we can have eclipses, and solar is an inverter-based power resource. It doesn't have inertia like other power generators. And it really does make it difficult for the system operators to anticipate when that demand is going to go away and come back because of these solar resources. We know that the ISO is very concerned with the amount of solar behind the meter, and they have been collecting more and more data from us and other distributors to find out where it is and how much it is, just to make their market anticipation more accurate. On the lower level, on the micro side of things here at CMLP, without a SCADA system in place, we have very little real-time data as to the production of solar and the demand of electricity. What we don't want to have happen is to go negative with our demand and have solar push back because we're not configured to do that, and it would trip out the transformer at the substation and take out either half or all of the town. So we don't want to do that. We like solar for probably obvious reasons. Obviously, it's clean energy. The ISO mix that comes into the substation is a blend. And even if we buy 100% of clean power, the power is whatever the mix is. And the mix does contain carbon emitting resources. So having solar generated on our system is the only way to really guarantee that we're getting clean energy here in Concord. It also eliminates the transmission costs that we get from the power we get from all the other places where it's actually generated. So what we're trying to do is address those issues with our SCADA deployment. SCADA has been fully procured. We actually have a kickoff meeting today to go over some of the project timelines and deliverables. And we think that this is about a year-long project, but it really depends on the delivery. We might squeak in by this year. It may be delayed until the spring. We're not sure when that will be, but we know that very soon we'll have the visibility. Keep in mind that just like the advanced metering system, the day the first meter goes in is not the day that you have the real visibility. It's kind of once you've gone through the seasons and you see what your data looks like, where you have the problem areas. So you kind of have to go through those low load, high load times to really understand what you're dealing with. We also have other things like the metering domain, which we'll probably at some point stop calling the metering domain, but the ability for us to push back power to Eversource. The longer we work at this, the more we are finding the hurdles disappearing, and this seems like it might be actually a pretty easy process. Talking to PLM and talking to Energy New England and our helpful people who have worked at the ISO, it seems as though this is going to be a much easier process than we envisioned. So by the time we have SCADA, we may be ready to go. Remember, SCADA is a requirement to push back power because Eversource does need to see what things are looking like before they are willing to accept power back in that direction. So it would be modifying relay settings and then giving them visibility into the system so that they can kind of see where things are going. If low load events are happening and they see that power might be pushed back, they can prepare for whatever is going to happen when that does push back. So that's good news. But we're kind of in this interim period where we can't accept a lot of solar, but a battery, could, by the time somebody deploys a large battery, we may have addressed some of these issues and we may not be in such the solar saturated state that we're in today. So what we're looking for is some board feedback on the appetite for maybe modifying the net metering policy to open it up to say, may require a battery or curtailment or something else. So basically just loosening that requirement so that the staff have discretion to look at the project size, to look at the system in that area, to look at the conductors to make sure that it's possible, and then recommend a strategy and hopefully the lowest cost, easiest strategy for that business. We've discussed this with council because we're obviously concerned that we don't want to have something that applies to one person, here and something that applies to somebody else there. We have wide latitude to protect the system, the distribution system, and make sure that we don't cause harm to any of our customers. So we would definitely be developing an internal set of policies and procedures on how to handle these events so that it's not really just so if somebody feels like a battery should be there, but it shouldn't be there, we will have kind of protocols to deal with that, and we will aim for curtailment in every possible scenario. But there may be, certain things where it would just say that that's just not possible because of the environment there. But that would be the goal, is until we feel like we've addressed some of these vulnerabilities, we could allow curtailment as an option for those folks who maybe don't really have the funds or finances to install a battery. So that's pretty much the overview, and I was just hoping we could have some discussion and get some feedback on the board's appetite for us modifying the policy.
Any board members want to respond to that? Brian?
Yeah,
And Chris.
so the 50 kilowatts, it does seem a bit arbitrary. It kind of has to be to pick a spot to start with. So I'm not nitpicking that. But with the residents, I see this as a big barrier. I know that Fenn School went through this where they wanted to do a 158 kilowatt array on a G3 customer, and they were asked to put in a battery. Even CMLP said, if you give us an easement, we'll put in the battery. But in the end, the project didn't go forward because it was already a stretch for them to figure out how to do solar and this complicated things. So this policy would have to apply evenly to all customers. So saying that someone wants to put in a 50 kilowatt array, even if it's an area where we have very little solar, this could make a barrier to not get any solar in that area. Whereas in certain areas, we have solar saturation on certain feeder lines where we want a lower minimum. So I think it's really, I don't want residents to really get impacted with this unless they have a really ridiculously large array, which we do have some examples of that. 160 something kilowatt array is not normal for a resident. So I just want to differentiate residents from commercial entities and pick a scale. Right now, we've kind of picked 50 kilowatts. Maybe that should be 75 or 100, such that residents don't get really impacted by this, but large arrays do. Because the large arrays are really what we got to curtail in the short term. I know the middle school is going to come on board, but we have a battery going in with that. So what we can't do is put in that without the battery. That would really.
Well, Brian, we need to move on.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah.
Thanks. Chris?
Well, yeah, I think flexibility makes sense. I wonder if there's a way to require folks who are going to do curtailment to have provisions, whether it's something in the wiring or similar, to allow a future battery installation.
Well, that's a good idea.
One more thought was curtailment really isn't a strategy because it requires action during the times of low demand, high production by the customer, and relying on the customer to physically interact in a timely manner is difficult.
Yeah, no, it wouldn't. What we've looked at and what we've kind of been working with a larger commercial customer who wants to install a lot of solar is basically a design where, you know, at the inverter level where there's an interconnection, there's basically a device that's placed, and that device just only lets power go one way. So if it sees power going the other way, it just shuts off or powers down some portion of the system. So it would not be a manual process.
Chris, you're on mute.
Oh, I think I already spoke.
Oh, sorry. Okay, John.
Yeah, the change that's being proposed, you know, providing this flexibility, you know, makes good sense to me. The threshold of 50 kilowatts, yeah, I mean, to me, that seems like a reasonable threshold. If the distinction is kind of residential customers versus, you know, commercial customers, I really would be surprised in terms of how many residential customers are we going to see that are going to be in that neighborhood. But I obviously don't have kind of real world experience there, but just some thoughts.
Thanks. Bianca.
Yeah, I want to understand a little bit better what the curtailment means, because when I asked earlier whether it's possible to turn off the solar supply, Jason, I thought you said no.
Right. Right. Go ahead, ask your question, and then I'll.
Okay, but in this case, then this would be a separate installation of a device in these larger arrays that would allow for that automatic shut off. Is that correct?
Right. So the customer is going to install something before the meter that will control the solar automatically, to basically just say that the solar production can go up to the point of their own internal consumption, but if it ever tries to go the other way, this device will not let it. So this is a one-off device for these larger solar installations. This is not something that's already installed anywhere on any customer device today. It's just something that it's a relatively low cost. It's not a very sophisticated system. It's just looking for electricity going, you know, hitting a certain voltage, and when it does, it sends a message to the inverter and says turn off some or all of your solar, and so that is not something we can control. We're not going to flip a switch. We're not going to say, oh gosh, guys, like let's curtail. It just basically is going to have a solar output, and if the output exceeds the demand of that customer, it will either turn off all or some of it.
Okay.
So that prevents them from net metering at all.
Right. So on these very large commercial installations, they're not trying to net meter anyway. They're trying to just cover their own production, and there would only be a handful of days a year that these projects would ever even come close to pushing back. It just alleviates the concern of the distribution operators that they would have to address that flood of excess solar. So these are, we're thinking large, much larger than 50. We're talking hundreds of kW. So we have a project right now that's 700 kW that's proposed. And if it were that much that were coming on the system, it could cause problems.
Yeah. Well, that sounds like a great idea.
Yeah. So it sounds like, you know, the board is comfortable with you taking a more flexible approach and not requiring batteries for systems over 50 kW and, you know, resolving things on a case-by-case basis based on what makes most sense in that particular case. Is there anybody who wants to object to giving the staff that flexibility? Okay, good. So I think that's all we need to do at the moment on this topic. We'll be coming back and talking more about solar net metering later, but we do want to at least give a little guidance in the hope that some larger projects can go forward that might have been stopped in their tracks if they saw that the only option for them was going to be batteries. We're now going to turn to what's going to be a great and interesting presentation here. And let me, Jason, are you going to introduce this or Laura?
How about Laura introduces it, only because Laura has worked with Gibb so much.
Yeah.
Yes, good morning. We are very lucky to have with us this morning Professor Gilbert Metcalf, commonly known as Gibb to those he loves, including the light plant. And he has been working on this project for some time now. As you may be aware, CMLP has had for a number of years a program called the Google CAP Group. We set up a Google group to inform customers on a few hot days of the summer. We send them an alert that says, hey, we're expecting a peak. Could you please voluntarily cut back on your electricity usage? And we provide them with a list of actions they could take to help do that. And we give a period of time, like a certain hours between 5 and 8 or between 4 and 7 this night, could you please cut back? And we try not to do it more than 6 or 8 times a summer so that people don't get tired of it. And Gibb had the question, well, I wonder how effective this program is. Like when you send out these alerts and ask people to voluntarily cut back, do we see a response? And so this is the project he's been working on. We've provided him with some data and information, and he's applied some pretty sophisticated tools to come up with the answer. So with that introduction, I'd like to turn it over to Professor Metcalf.
Thank you, Laura. And it's a pleasure to be here with you all to do this presentation. I'm going to share my screen. And let's see, I want my PowerPoint presentation. So I hope you all can see the slides.
We can.
Yeah, we got it.
Great. Okay, so this is so just as a little bit of background, I'm an energy economist. I've taught for a number of years at Tufts University. I'm retired there now, and I'm now at the Sloan School at MIT. I've done a lot of work on tax policy, particularly around energy pricing, the role of taxation in energy prices. I've done some work on energy information programs like the yellow energy guide labels that you see on appliances. I spent a little less than 2 years at Treasury in the Obama administration working on climate finance issues and going to the international COP meetings, the climate negotiations. And I've written a book that came out a few years ago on the role of a carbon tax in climate policy. So that's my background. And as Laura indicates, we have this information alert through the Google Alert program, and I was very curious to know how that would, how effective is this policy. And I originally contacted Laura and said I'd love to get hourly data at the household level from those households who sign up. And Laura told me, well, we can't do that. We don't have that data, and partly because we don't have smart meters yet. Things have moved along, but we also don't know who's getting these alerts and how they respond to them. So we thought about it some more and realized there's still a way to do it by getting the aggregate hourly load at the CMLP level and looking at how that tracks as these alerts get put in place. And as Laura indicated, these are sent out a few times each summer, and each alert covers multiple hours. And the reason for this program is that as part of the ISO New England charging to its load-serving entities like CMLP, they charge not only for the power that we buy, but also for the cost of capacity. We have a forward capacity market that buys in guaranteed supply from generators so that ISO New England knows what's going to be available. And that historically has been rather expensive. And I'll explain why the peak alert program is important. It is the way the charging system works is that it looks at the single highest peak hour for ISO New England in the year, which is going to be in the summer in the summertime, and then it looks at, well, what is every load serving entity's share of that load, and each load serving entity's share of the capacity costs are going to be based on the share of that coincident peak in that 1 hour. So there's a huge incentive for CMLP to lower our consumption, lower our load in that 1 hour, if we knew when that hour was. But of course, we don't know when that hour is. But Laura can try to predict it. So if we look, for example, if we look at this bold indicated row, we're paying for capacity from a period from June 1st, 2023 through May 31st, 2024, for example. And they look at data from the calendar year of 2022 to find out, well, what was the peak day for ISO New England? Well, it was August 8th. The peak hour was between 15 and 1600, 3 or 4 p.m. And the system peak load was a little over 24,000 megawatts. And the CMLP load at that time was 37 megawatts. So our share of that of the ISO New England peak was about 0.15%, 15 basis points if you prefer. And that's roughly pretty steady if you look over those years that I've recorded in this table. It actually turns out that our charges are not based on the overall ISO New England peak. It's based on as a percentage of our zonal peak. And we are, for the last several years, we've been in the Southeast New England zone. There are 3 zones. There's the Northern New England, Southeast New England, and then rest of the pool. And just to give you a preview of the results, going back 2018 is the left bar, going over to 2024, the value of reducing our peak, and I'll explain how I get these numbers a little bit later in my presentation, has dropped from about $21 per kilowatt month, which is about $21,000 per megawatt, $21,570. It has dropped over time to, in 2024, this is the capacity commitment period. So 2024 refers to the period from June 1st, 2023 through May 31st, 2024. Think of this like a fiscal year. It's dropped to about $3,700 per megawatt. So it was a huge deal back 2017, 2018 or so. It's been less of an issue, the capacity costs, but ISO New England is expecting these costs to rise in the future. We'll see if they do, but they're expecting those costs to go up again. And I'll explain how I get these numbers in a minute. So the question I tried to answer was, well, how much do we reduce our load? And as a secondary question, just out of interest, how much does this program reduce our demand, which is a little bit different because of our solar production within the community. Our demand is equal to our load, the amount that we buy from ISO New England, as well as our solar production within the community. And I also wanted to quantify the benefits. Let me skip the residential loads, about 45% of total load. So I have data, hourly load data. I'm focusing on the summer months, June through September, 2009 through 2024. I've got information on when the peak alerts are, when Laura is calling a peak alert. I've got some solar data as well. I've got a bunch of weather data for Hanscom Field and data from ISO New England, which I'll be using in the analysis. So our peak load, we see that our peaks are in the summertime. In 2023, our highest peak was in September, followed by July. This is just a quick, there's variation both across months, across days of the week, and across hours of the day, not surprising. Here are the peak alert messages that people get. This one is from September 6, 2023. We think there's going to be a peak alert the next day, Thursday, September 7th. So we're calling the alert from 4 p.m. to 7 p.m. And that message goes out with some information about what the projection is for weather conditions the next day. And then there's some suggestions of what you can do to reduce your load. So these are people who who are signed up for the Google Alert program get these messages. When do peak alert messages, what hours do they cover? They cover typically hours ending between, well, always, this is the histogram for 2 p.m. through 8 p.m. And I'm going to call these the midday hours, and I'm going to focus my analysis on those hours in which a peak alert could be called. So the question is, what's the impact of the program? Just quick, I've got a lot of data, about a little under 14,000 observations on real-time load in Concord. The average in these midday hours is a little under 25 megawatts. There's considerable variation. I just actually looked up to see when was this minimum day, 8.7. It was on September 19th, 2020. It was a cool, dry day. It sounds like the kind of day that you all were talking about a few minutes ago in terms of low load. Peak alerts are called for a little less than 2% of the hours in those middays. And that's going to make it a little bit of a challenge to identify an impact, because this is such a rare occurrence to call one of these alerts. I have load data, the overall ISO New England load, which is useful for explaining demand at the load, excluding our community load through CMLP, and weather data and so forth. So the kind of analysis I'm doing is it's a statistical framework using econometrics, where I'm basically going to be looking at the relationship between our hourly load and an indicator variable, which is equal to 1 if Laura has called for a peak alert during that hour, and 0 if it doesn't. And then I'm going to have a bunch of other controls for weather conditions. This X is controlling for weather conditions in the community, as well as what is the load, the simultaneous load in the rest of ISO New England, because there's a lot of things that weather doesn't necessarily fully capture that could be driving our load. And so by including the ISO New England load, other than the Concord load, it helps to predict and soak up some of the variation, so that I can then understand how our peak alert system is affecting our load. I put in controls for the hour of the day of the week, the month of the year, and the year, just because there's variation over all those dimensions. So that's the framework I use, and I run a regression. And lo and behold, if you run that regression, what you find is that the hours that the peak alert is being called leads to higher demand. If you believed my regression, where I don't include any of those controls for day of week, hour of day, and so forth, or any weather conditions, it would suggest that, oh, Laura calls a peak alert and our demand goes up 11 megawatts. This is clearly nonsense. As I put more and more controls into the regression, I drive down the number, and those stars indicate how precisely estimated this coefficient is. It's a very precisely estimated coefficient, but it's still saying, oh, Laura calls a peak alert and our demand goes up, our load goes up. Well, clearly something's wrong with this. And what's wrong is that, well, when does CMLP call for a peak alert? It's on a day that we think that the load is going to be very high, demand is going to be very high. And unless I've really controlled for everything that affects demand, I'm going to get a spurious correlation. I'm going to get a spurious correlation, because these alerts are not randomly put in place. Laura calls them when she thinks peak is going to be demand is going to be high, and so I need to somehow address that statistical problem. It's a standard problem in doing any kind of policy evaluation. And so what I need to do is, so the first thing I did was I called up Laura, and I just want to pause for a moment and say Laura has been tremendously helpful and incredibly patient with me as I asked increasingly arcane questions. I just want to really give a shout out to Laura for her assistance with this project. So first thing I said, well, Laura, when do you call a peak alert? And she said, well, I look at a bunch of things, and one of the things I look at is that we get information from ISO New England as to what they think the peak demand is going to be the next day, and that's going to be an important predictor of the actual peak. And so I said, well, that's great. I can use that information. I could potentially also use predictions of temperature in Boston and Hartford, as well as dew point. But the projected peak load is especially important. And this allows me to use an instrumental variable approach. And let me not spend time on this, but just say that if I can find a variable that is correlated with Laura's decision to call a peak, but is not actually correlated with the actual demand on the day that the peak alert is in effect, then that is something that can help me tease out the independent effect of the peak alert program. And it's clear that the day ahead forecast is going to be correlated with Laura's decision to call for a peak alert, but it's not actually going to be driving the actual temperature. If ISO New England says it's going to be a hot day tomorrow, that doesn't mean that the weather doesn't say, oh, ISO New England told us to be hot today, so we're going to be hot. It doesn't work that way, obviously. So once I take that approach, I begin to get more sensible results. And so now if you look across the row at the top here, you see I now have a negative coefficient, meaning that when the peak alert is called, once I control for this endogeneity, I find that load does in fact go down. And my first column did not include any weather variables, and you get about a 0.5 megawatt reduction during a peak hour, peak alert hour. If I control for weather conditions, then it's a little bit larger, about a little less than 3/4 of a megawatt reduction. I also tried adding more instruments, but the problem is I lose a lot of variables, and so this is not a very precisely estimated coefficient, but it's reasonably so. It becomes less precise, and part of the problem is it's the reduction in variables. Reduction in the number of observations that I have. And the last thing I just looked at was, well, Jason asked a good question when I presented to Laura and Jason and a few others. Well, has the effect changed over time? And so I asked, well, what is there a difference in later years, say 2020 to 2024? And you do find that the initial effect is negative and it gets a little more negative. You would add these together to get the total effect in these latter years, but it's not very precisely estimated. So there's some hints that it's become more effective, but I wouldn't want to bet the house on it. So let's just I think this number that the peak alert program is reducing load by about 0.7 megawatts, 700 kilowatts in those peak alert hours is a sensible, reasonable number. So let's just think for a moment, what is that? Is it plausible? Well, if we look at the average summer peak in 2023, it was about 33 megawatts in Concord. So that's about a 2% reduction. And if we look at the peak in July, which a little bit higher, it's about 2% reduction. So it's reducing load a little bit. And I would be surprised if it reduced it a huge amount. And if you think about the fact that residential load is about 40% of total load, it suggests that residential load is falling on the order of 4 to 5%. Is that sensible? I defer to you all for your judgment. Of course, there may be other things the CMLP is doing during those hours to try to encourage a reduction in load, which I've not controlled for. So perhaps this would be capturing some other policies as well, or other initiatives as well. Let me just get through the presentation, and if there's time, we can try to get some answers to questions. But the other thing I wanted to do is ask, well, what's the benefit of this program? So with data and through a lot of conversation with Laura and with Scott Bertrand at ISO New England, what we see is that if we can cut demand at a peak hour by 1 kilowatt, the left-hand column tells you what the value is per month, and I'm happy at some other time to go through the calculations of how we do that. If you then convert that to megawatts, and over the course of a year, in 2018, if we could reduce our peak by 1 megawatt, it would save $259,000 to CMLP in 2018. That number's gone down to $44,000 last year. Now, what's the value of the peak alert program? Well, we don't cut demand by a megawatt, we cut it by 0.7 megawatts, 714 kilowatts. So I just took the second column number and multiplied it by 0.714. And so the savings is gone from about $185,000 in a year to about $32,000 last year. And this is conditional on the peak alert occurring in an hour where the actual peak alert occurs. But it could be that Laura gets it wrong and she doesn't call a peak alert during the hour when the peak alert actually occurs. Well, if I go look back over the data that I have over the years of the program, I find that Laura does a pretty good job. The peak alert hour, a peak, the annual ISO New England peak occurs during one of those alert hours 5 out of 7 times. And so that means if I take the value of the peak alert conditional on it, on the alert, the peak occurring during an alert hour, multiply it by that probability, I get the expected value of the peak alert. And so what we see is that the value has gone down. Last year, the value of the program was on the order of $22,600. But again, as I said earlier, ISO New England expects this capacity cost to be rising in the years to come. So we may be at a local minimum with $22,000 last year. And the cost of the program is quite low. I mean, on a benefit cost ratio, that ratio is huge. The cost is almost zero. Well, are there some other savings? Well, we save energy during those hours. We save about 700 kilowatts during those hours of peak alerts. We've got about a little under 16 hours of peak alerts in the summer. Take the highest local marginal price in the summertime, which is in 2022. Well, you're saving about $1,200 in energy costs. So it's really dwarfed by the capacity cost. Well, we also have some savings, which are social savings of, well, what's the savings in pollution? And I can use ISO New England data on pollutions during high demand periods and then multiply them by the social costs of carbon and the social costs of NOxes that the Biden administration Environmental Protection Agency put out. And we see that there's an additional savings of about $1,000. So there's about $2,200 in savings other than the capacity cost, but the capacity costs are the real benefit. The capacity cost savings are the real benefit of this program. The last thing I did, I'm not going to spend any time on this. I did look at how much are we actually producing, since we've got about 10 megawatts of solar in the community between rooftop and the 3 solar arrays. And I found that the summertime capacity factor is about 26%, 23 to 26%. So load is a little bit less than total demand, but it's not a huge difference. So let me just stop to save a minute or two for questions. There are not many peak alert days, so it's hard to really pin down this estimate very precisely, but my best estimate is that it's reducing load on the order of 700 kilowatts during an hour of alert, which is saving CMLP customers in recent years on the order of $20,000 to $40,000 or so $1,000. So it's I think a very cost-effective program when you think about how inexpensive it is to actually do this. We're just sending out a Google blast. It's a little bit of Laura's time. So let me stop there, and I would be happy to try to answer questions in the minute or two that we have remaining.
Well, we could go over a few minutes because this is very interesting, and it's great that you were able to get any meaningful results out of what's fairly messy data. So thank you for taking this on. John, then Chris, then Bianca.
Yeah, Thank you so much for this analysis. It's really good. I just had one comment in terms of the energy savings that you looked at. My thought, I have two comments there. One is you're framing those in terms of megawatts, but I think they should be framed in terms of megawatt hours. So I think that they could be considerably higher. Recognizing that during this peak hour, right, if we're, so it's, I don't know if it's possible to kind of to go back to that one page. I'm thinking that the units probably should be megawatt hours, maybe not megawatts. Another
The
question.
unit of observation is an hour, so it's data. So a megawatt is a megawatt hour in this analysis.
But
I mean, you're right that within an hour there can be variation within that hour. Perhaps that's what you're thinking about. But I don't have that. I don't have that variation within the hour.
got it. And is the energy avoided or is it shifted? Right. So if it were shifted, then conceivably the savings will be what's the cost in the hour to which the demand is shifted?
That's a good point, and I didn't mention that just in the interest of time. But so my estimates in terms of the savings on the avoided energy costs, that's an upper bound on the assumption that the load is actually reduced as opposed to shifted. If it's shifted, then the savings is going to be less, both in terms of the energy costs avoided as well as the pollution benefits, pollution avoidance benefits. But the capacity, if it's shifted, it's still a benefit on the capacity charge.
For sure. Yep. Really interesting analysis. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Chris?
Chris, you're
Sorry,
muted.
yeah, I couldn't find the mute button. Sorry about that. So a couple things. So did I see something in there about how many people in Concord are actually getting this message? And wondering about that. I also get a message from other people. I think Green Consumers Alliance or something, Green Energy Consumers Alliance sends me one. And then I forward it to everyone in my office. So one message may impact lots of people. So I think that's an interesting
Yeah,
thing
I
to
have
think
that on the
about.
paper. I think it's on the order of Laura can correct me, 300 or so individuals who were signed up for the Google alert. But then as you correctly point out, a lot of people forward it. My neighbor sometimes forwards it to me. So we don't really know the full penetration of this message.
Yeah.
Right. And so that
760 people are currently signed up. I have 760 email addresses, but some of those are listservs.
Okay. And then that begs the question of how do we get more people signed up?
We advertise it every time we give out a rebate. Anytime anybody calls us, we let them know that we have this program, and we actually sign them up for it on an opt-out basis. So if you sign up for one of our rebates, you automatically will get added to this list unless you opt out.
Got it.
So we do try to add to it over time, and it has grown.
Thank you.
Bianca?
Yeah. So I have a question that leads to, we had some discussions last year about adding battery or buying a large battery to do peak shaving. And one of the part of the analysis to the cost of the cost efficacy of the purchase was this peak shaving that would be provided. And Laura, I don't know, I'm curious to know what Laura thinks in terms of the cost, what Professor Metcalf showed in terms of the cost coming, or the price of the peak shave coming down, whether that has any implications for the battery installation.
So the analysis that Professor Metcalf performed is not dissimilar to the economic analysis we performed on trying to estimate the battery savings. What I will point out is that while capacity prices have dropped precipitously, as you've seen in his presentation, from $15 or $20 per kW month down to $3, At the same time, transmission costs have gone in the other direction. We used to spend, $7, $8 per kW for transmission, and now we're spending 12 to 14. So they've almost swapped places. The transmission peak is a slightly different. The capacity peak is a once a year thing because the capacity is based on the highest hour of the year. So you have to reduce just that 1 hour to lower your capacity payment. Transmission is slightly different. You have to be able to reduce the highest hour each month for 12 months in a row.
Okay,
So
that
you
makes a
reduce
lot
your-
of sense.
But it's
That-
worth a lot more right now to be able to reduce the transmission.
Okay,
And
thank you.
Laura and I had actually talked about adding sort of analysis of the benefits in the summer months of savings on transmission. I just haven't done that. But I do want to note that ISO New England thinks that those capacity costs are going to be going up. So.
Yeah.
just note that.
Okay, terrific. Thank you so much.
Ryan,
This is awesome. Yeah, Laura knows just how often I look at this stuff and have done my own analysis. This is great to see. It lines up with my belief that this program does about 0.5% reduction. That was the ballpark I was guessing at. And it's great to see the analysis kind of bears that out. The I agree the capacity market is one where it drops and it gets lower, and then suddenly there's a constraint and it balloons back to that large amount. I think this is a great study. I think we should continue to redo this study in a couple of years. The reason is how does time of use affect? The big question is, this is a voluntary program. Once we put a financial aspect where people are paying on peak pricing, how does that change behavior and people participating in this? And then maybe in a few years we do something when it does balloon, the capacity cost does balloon, we consider something like critical peak pricing, which puts a premium on this response. So makes these alerts have a financial impact to people's bills. And that we'll see if that analysis really gets people to change behavior more dramatically and reduce this cost when it balloons. So this is great. I hope that in a few years we redo it and so forth.
And I'll just note that now that we have smart meters installed in most of the town, the ability to do more interesting experiments and more granular analyses is going to go up exponentially, which I think is really quite exciting, the opportunities and potential.
And if
I'm gonna, Brian,
I'm just gonna one comment and I'm gonna get off. I have a bunch of analysis from my own house that I can share for responding to these peak alerts, and I can show you the devices going off and so forth. So if I can find your email, I'll send you something.
So I'm going to give the last word to Pamela Cady in a second, but Gib, I hope this just whetted your appetite to wanting to help us do some analysis when we have all that additional data from the smart meters, and especially to understand what the impact of time of use rates is. It would be great to get your help on that. Pamela.
Sorry, I know I'm not actually officially a member of the light board,
You're
but so I didn't
honorary.
know if I could ask a question.
Yes,
If not,
please.
that's fine. Because I'm just a step member at CMLP, but I was just wondering, Professor Metcalf, about whether, if I missed it, that if if the email successfully coincided with the actual peak 5 of the 7 years, then wouldn't one way to look at it to be look at the reduction in those 5 years versus the non-reduction in the
It's actually,
other
sorry,
years.
I'm going way too fast in my presentation. I took the total number of, I looked at the, yes, that's right. So I have 7, so I have 7 observations of when the peak hour is that ISO New England calls, and I ask, was there a peak alert during those hours or not?
So it is factored in there. So
Yeah. but my interest has been not so much whether it matched up, but rather when those alerts get called, what happens to the CMLP load? But in terms of valuing it, we need to know whether in fact Laura was successful at calling a peak alert during an hour when the actual coincident peak occurred. And
Right, because I was wondering, like, so the 5 times when it did coincide with the actual peak, what was the reduction in or what was our total load versus the times when we didn't send out the email? Like, does it show that we had a greater percentage of the regional load?
Oh,
in
we are
Concord
such a
then?
small, it's not going to change our share of the regional load because we're such a small user in the big, we're a small fish in the big pond. But what we do know is that when the alert gets called, load falls by about 700 kilowatts. That's what the analysis tells us. Whether it was happened to be at the coincident peak or not. Whenever the alert gets called, those hours, on average, load is falling 700 kilowatts.
Well,
And for the
thank you.
record-
Let's leave it, Pamela, we need to
Thank you.
stop. Thank you. Let's leave it on that note, which is a very positive one, and let's turn to public comments. Anybody have any public comments they want to make? Pamela Dredd.
Hi, Pamela Dritt, 13 Concord Green. Is there a way that we can incentivize the private investment in solar and storage? And gosh, Gib, you were so inspiring, finding ways of measuring like externalized costs of things. If couldn't we have a lower rate for heat pump customers? Because they can't do time of use changing for it. And can't we incentivize battery installation? Could we have battery solar coaches like we do for heat pump coaches? Find ways, thinking outside the box, to avoid the solar saturation problem without lowering the amount of solar we want to put in. Every investment a homeowner makes in solar is investment in green energy that CMLP doesn't need to make, that the community as a whole doesn't need to make, so we can leverage it if we can find ways. Because
Thank you. Well, those are good points, and I certainly agree with you that we should be thinking about ways to incentivize installation of batteries. As part of the cost of service study, there's going to be some analysis of the impact of time of use rates on heat pumps, and that will determine whether it makes sense to do anything different to provide additional incentives for heat pumps or not. We need to see the data on that first.
And could we also use that as an argument for town investment in electric school bus infrastructure?
Well, I mean, that seems like a somewhat different question, but we'll, see where things are going with electric school buses in general, whether there are still going to be incentives for that from the federal government or the state government or others, but
But
we'll
it
see.
doesn't matter because we need it for battery, for storage. The benefits of having vehicle to grid and mobile battery production is greater than just green school buses.
Well, yeah. Well, at some point, when we have the new rates in place, we should do some analysis of the potential impact of electric school buses as well. But I think we need to end at this point because we're out of time. Thank you, Pamela. Is there a motion from a board member to adjourn the meeting?
I'll move that.
Is second?
I'll give a second.
Thank you. And Chris, you need to vote to adjourn?
Oh, yes, adjourn, please.
Bianca,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Brian,
Yes.
and I say yes as well. Thank you all very much for coming to what turned out to be a very interesting meeting with great presentations. Thanks for everybody who gave them. And we'll see you later this month for the SMUD meeting.
Thank you.
I know.
Yes, terrific meeting.